Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for Engage in Trade, Earth Day 2024. On this Earth Day, this is the actual day of Earth Day, and our theme and our webinar event today is Planet versus Plastics, which is the official theme for Earth Day 2024. I'm sure that you all are going to get some inspiration and maybe some disturbing information, but I think it's going to be an invigorating event today. My name is Susan Spitz. I'm the Manager of International Business Development here at World Trade Center St. Louis. Thank you all for joining us. And as I mentioned, all of us, whether we're individuals or business owners or whether we do international trade, I think we all have a part to play in protecting our planet. So we are very honored today to have a special guest from earthday.org, the actual organization, who's going to discuss the theme this year and some of the industries that maybe are our biggest culprits and some of the things that are being done to kind of help mitigate damage to the planet. We will also hear from two Missouri entrepreneurs who have incorporated planet-friendly practices. Really, it's a big part of why their businesses run at all. So just a couple of housekeeping rules to let you know about. All participants will be muted for the duration of the presentation. But if you wish to ask questions, please do so using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to get to those at the end of the formal discussion, although our speaker from Earth Day will have to leave a little bit early. So after he makes his remarks, there will be an opportunity to ask him a question or two. The slides and recording of this presentation will be available within a couple of days after the webinar is completed, and any links that are shared as well. So we're really happy to have you all on board. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Deputy Director of the World Trade Center St. Louis, Stella Sheehan. Stella has been with the World Trade Center for over 18 years, and she leads our trade team consisting of myself and Annie Mbale, who is our webmaster today. She also heads up our Chancellor's Certificate in International Trade, which is an online export training program. She oversees our 16 sister cities and is the executive producer of our signature event, Growing Global. Stella was born and raised in Ireland and has lived, worked, and studied extensively in international markets, including Belgium, France, Italy, and the UK. She holds a BA in French and Italian from the National University of Ireland at Galway and an MA in Applied Languages for Business from the University of Ulster at Coleraine in Northern Ireland. And she is also a graduate of Leadership St. Louis and was appointed to the Missouri District Export Council in January of last year. And like I always say, she's also the wind beneath the wings of our executive director, Tim Nowak. So Stella is going to give a brief overview of World Trade Center, our St. Louis work, and introduce you to our panel. Over to you, Stella.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that very gracious introduction, and thank you all for joining us on this Earth Day 2024. As Susan mentioned, I lead the trade side of the house, and we like to say that the World Trade Center has three main pillars: people, trade, and investment, the three key equal ingredients that go into making a global city. The people side consists of our 16 sister cities, as Susan referenced, and perhaps our most well-known initiative, the St. Louis Mosaic Project, which is headed up by our colleague Betsy Cohen. And that is an initiative to attract foreign-born to the region and assist them by way of programming and networking once they get here. The trade side provides companies with the tools they need to trade internationally by way of counseling, referrals to our federal and state partners, and organizing educational events like the one you're attending today. Last but certainly not least, our foreign direct investment, or FDI pillar, which is led by our colleague Sean Mullins, assists companies around the globe who may be interested in setting up their North American base in the region, while simultaneously assisting foreign companies who've already decided to make St. Louis their home. So with that, let's get to our introductions and our esteemed panelists today. I'm actually going to introduce the speakers in reverse order, as they will each be presenting in turn. So our final speaker is Alan Coggins, inventor, founder, and CEO of Cocoon Revolution by Thermosci. Alan is a leader in the realm of heating technology and innovation with over 25 years of hand-on experience. He is the co-founder with his wife of the company, where he spearheads the design and construction of the Cocoon family brand of thermal mass furnaces, energy pods, and mobile sterilization chambers. Alan successfully completed two four-year apprenticeships in the HVACR, heating, air conditioning, ventilation, and refrigeration field. He is a Mason and president of the Moolah Mount Lancers at Shriners. Alan supports causes such as animal welfare, children, and the environment. When he's not revolutionizing the HVAC and energy landscape, he finds solace in nature, whether it's riding his horses or enjoying quality time with his family outdoors. So thank you, Alan, for being here. And in the middle of the pack, we will hear from Hayley Russell. Hayley is the founder and CEO of Chippen, a sustainable pet nutrition company. Hayley is an experienced food and beverage operator who worked for Boston Consulting Company as a consultant and started her career as a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs. In the years before launching Chippen, Hayley had led projects in the human food and beverage industry, including scaling a juice startup, launching bike delivery with Uber Eats, and working with coffee cooperatives in East Africa. She holds a BA of Economics and Global Health Studies. Hayley is a 2023 Arch Grant winner who moved to St. Louis from the Boston area, along with her dogs, Wren and Fisher. As a lifelong animal lover and environmentalist, she has always been conscious about sourcing humane, sustainable ingredients for her own food. And as a dog mom, it was a challenge to provide the same level of quality for her pups, which led to her founding Chippen. So we're delighted to have you here, Hayley, with us today and in the region. And finally, Tom Cosgrove. Tom is Chief Creative and Content Officer for earthday.org. He brings over 25 years of diverse experience spanning media, entertainment, digital technology, marketing, environmental, and NGO sectors. With a proven track record in strategic planning, content programming, branding, marketing, P&L oversight, and board management, he has led executive positions at top-tier companies, including General Manager for Discovery and Science Channels, Executive Vice President of ABC Family Channel at Disney, General Manager of TV Guide Television Group, and Executive Vice President of Fox Family Worldwide at News Corp. As CEO and president of the groundbreaking 3Net joint venture, Tom pioneered the world's first 3D television channel and studio. He provides chief operations and advisory services to startups and serves on nonprofit boards and executive committees. Combining C-suite leadership with creative vision, Tom holds an MBA in finance and marketing and a BA in economics from the University of Wisconsin. So over to you, Tom, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Stella. I appreciate that wonderful introduction. And I am a Wisconsin native, but I will say my family and I took several vacations, have taken several vacations in Missouri over the years, and including a couple of baseball camps when I was a kid. So I have fond memories and a fondness for St. Louis and Missouri as a whole, and it's a pleasure to be here. Today, however, I'm joining you from Ottawa, the capital city of Canada. Why, you may ask? Because delegates from around about 160 countries worldwide, as well as NGOs and industry representatives from around the world, are convening here in Ottawa to discuss the next draft of the Global Plastics Treaty, which will have major impacts on supply chain policies and practices worldwide if ratified. Essentially, it's what the Paris Agreement was to climate. This is for plastics. Particularly focused on what is being called a life cycle approach with plastics. The draft includes proposed provisions covering all stages of the plastic value chain, from primary plastic polymers to waste management. And while the member states that are part of the process pretty much unanimously agreed that we're facing a global plastic pollution crisis, and the actions needed to be taken to tackle plastic pollution with a life cycle approach, they disagree about essentially where the life cycle should start. The key issue is whether to reduce or restrict the production of primary plastic polymers, that being essentially fresh plastic. Some member states consider that the plastic life cycle starts with the production of these primary plastic polymers. And so capping the production of these polymers can stop plastic pollution at its source. Others, like the US and other major oil-producing countries, argue that plastic's economic role essentially supersedes the growing health implications that we're seeing, and that the treaty should really not restrict plastic polymer production at all, but focus on sort of downstream fighting pollution only. The draft of the plastic treaty also attempts to promote a better product design to reduce plastic use overall and improve recycling. So approximately half of all plastics made today are single use. Let me just say that again. Half of all plastics made today are single use. It's an incredible number. And 40% of plastics used produced today, are for packaging. And that packaging can be what you see around an item in a grocery store. It can also be the plastic that's used on the crates that sort of holds the crates together. So the hope is that we can think of better designs to reduce excessive packaging. Can we replace packaging with local ecological materials? And how can we overall reduce single-use plastics? That one piece alone would have an incredible impact on the plastic issues we're facing. One of the critical obstacles to the plastic recycling and recycling generally with plastics is the large number and types of compositions of plastics. There are tens of thousands of chemicals and additives, making plastics difficult to separate, to consolidate, to process. If you look at the sort of little circle with the number in it, there's 1 through 7. 1 and 2 in some parts of the country are recycled at a decent rate. The other numbers essentially aren't at all, with a few exceptions, for various reasons. Either they're too expensive, the technology doesn't really exist, or there's no market for the recycled product afterwards. So given the difficulty and the high cost of collection and separation, there's a need to limit the types of additives in plastics. And that's something that the producers are calling for, and for a unification around the globe, so that there's some kind of consistency. So when you're filling a supply chain need in one part of the world, it's not completely different in terms of what's allowed in another part of the world. So some standardization around that. The concept of an extended producer responsibility is also a big part of the discussion. So the member states are generally agreeing on the principle of polluters paying, and the current draft includes a provision on extended producer responsibility to, quote, I'll just read this, establish and operate EPR systems to encourage increased recyclability, promote higher recycling rates, and enhance the accountability of producers and importers for safe and environmentally sound management of plastics and plastic products throughout their life cycle and across international supply chains. The draft also includes a provision on the enhancement of the accountability of producers and importers for safe and environmentally sound management of plastics and plastic products throughout their life cycle and across international supply chains. So that's what's going on here. Why is Earth Day involved? Earth Day began in 1970. This is the 54th anniversary of Earth Day. And it began with a senator from my home state, actually, Wisconsin, Gaylord Nelson, who, together with a student organizer at the time, Dennis Hayes, decided that some of the issues that were going on in the environment in the US needed the attention of the public, and for the public to advocate for change. Rivers were burning, smog was terrible. There was a major oil spill off the coast of California. And so they got together originally to do something on college campuses. Earth Day was actually, the day itself was chosen because it was between spring break and final exams. So it was a moment that students could actually get involved. And what ended up happening is it expanded well beyond college campuses to over 20 million people across the United States participated in Earth Day that year, and led to things like the establishment of the EPA, led to the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, many other pieces of legislation around the country that really started to move the needle on some needed environmental improvements for the country. That's continued every year since then. And in fact, Dennis Hayes, who I mentioned before, is still very much with us and advocating to this day. He's the chairman emeritus of our organization, which came out of his original efforts. And so he's still fighting the fight. And this year we decided to land on the theme of planet versus plastics. One, because of the sort of coincidence of these UNA discussions happening over Earth Day and the ability to use our sort of platform to help push for change there. And also because the plastic pollution problem is just kind of getting out of control. Globally, the industry produces over 400 million tons of plastics per year. And the vast majority of it, over 90%, is not recycled. It's dumped into landfills. But much of it makes its way into our water systems, our oceans, et cetera. And it's important to note here when we talk about recycling, there's a big difference between recycling with paper, glass, et cetera, and plastics. You know, with the former, the rates are pretty good. They're not perfect, but a lot of these things are recycled and we're able to reuse them. Plastics is just a very different story. Very few are actually recycled. And there's not a huge global demand for recycled plastics because many of them, once you recycle, they sort of downgrade, right? So you're sort of losing the value of the plastics each time it's recycled. Plastic production, unfortunately, is also growing at a tremendous rate. By 2040, we expect it to double from where it is today. By 2060, triple from where it is today. And it's already causing a huge pollution problem worldwide, hurting wildlife, killing biodiversity. But what is even more terrifying is the impact on human health, and we're just discovering those impacts now. Plastics are not inert. They break down into microplastics, and they leach out the toxic chemicals that they carry into the air, into the soil, into the oceans, and ultimately, unfortunately, into us. We did a report called Babies versus Plastics, giving a fairly terrifying overview of how it's hurting our children and us. If you think about babies in particular, they crawl, they're on the ground a lot, so they're coming in contact with household dust, which is unfortunately rich with microplastics and fibers that they breathe in. They're teething, so whether that's a plastic toy or just a plastic anything around the house, they're directly ingesting microplastics at a much higher rate than adults do. And, you know, it's not just restricted to babies, of course. It's been an issue now associated with various health issues, strokes, cancer, endocrine disruption, dementia. Unfortunately, the list goes on and on. And so it's a very serious problem. And what we're here to do, along with a lot of other NGOs, and we're hoping that people can join with us, is to push for a reduction in production. Recycling, unfortunately, isn't the answer for some of the reasons I laid out. The real answer is finding alternatives, and we're pushing for a 60% reduction in production by 2040. That sounds like a crazy number until you realize what I said earlier, that 50% of plastics are single use. So if we can make a big impact on just the single use plastics that are being produced, we can have a huge impact overall on plastics and the impact that they're having. So we're advocating here at places like the UN. We're advocating across the country, whether it's locally, at a state level, federal level. Everyone can get involved to the extent that they're willing to, whether that's signing a petition, whether that's going to a local cleanup and having an impact that way, whether it's just really taking stake of the use of plastics in your own home. I challenge people to try and go 5 minutes without using plastic. And you may think you've succeeded, and then unfortunately, the reality is you've probably been breathing them in that whole time. So they're everywhere, and it's, you know, no one single person can eliminate the problem, but I think collectively our hope is that by raising awareness on these health issues, raising awareness on some of the alternatives and potentials out here, some of these other panelists will be talking about today as well. It really gives us hope that we can make this happen. We can make the change we need to, and put the planet over plastics, ultimately, is our goal. So with that, maybe we could run the quick video. I think it doesn't have sound, but that's okay. It'll give you a sense, and you can see that in some other materials at earthday.org.
Yes, I will try to see if I can run this full screen.
So thank you, Susan and Stella. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, sorry that we weren't able to get that to go, to get the sound to come out on that, but we will include the link to that so people will be able to see it again. And it's pretty fast moving. I think it's meant to be shared on social, right?
It is, yeah. Please feel free to share widely. That's the
All
whole
right.
idea.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then, yes, we wanted to give you a couple of minutes for Q&A. Since I get the floor, I have the floor, I'm going to ask the first question. One is that we were in Asia recently, in Thailand, actually, where there's a big street food, like everything is street food. And there was so much plastic. Like, I don't know if there's a way, like every time, if you ordered a beverage or you ordered anything, they would put it in a to-go plastic bag. Is there, like, if you're in a situation where you're getting those kinds of plastics, is there anything you can do with them? Like, I mean, I don't think I could have said no thank you, or I could have, I suppose, but is there a way to peel them off or something so they don't get into the rest of the environment?
It's tough. I mean, it's, there are things you can try to do, I don't, know this exact situation you were in, but sometimes there's, you can ask for, ask for it without the packaging around it in certain places. If you're out, maybe not on a trip like that, but perhaps if you're close to your home, having your own containers with you, just like people carry, I think at this point, most people have gotten used to carrying water bottles around. That seemed like a very foreign, strange concept just maybe 10 years ago, frankly. And I think now it's become sort of a norm. So I think if we can, sort of realize those practices, and that's why I always ask people, just think about what you're using. Take 5 minutes. That's really all it takes, and you'll realize how much plastic there is. And it's not to shame people or make them feel bad. It's just to help people realize, gosh, there's a lot, and there are some simple things I can do. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's, every situation is a little different. Unfortunately, once you have the plastic, I mean, disposing of it properly helps, of course. If it's recyclable, attempting to do that, and as I said, some countries and regions are better at it than others, and so there's a possibility there. But it's really about, where possible, trying to choose a different substance.
Yeah, there were some aluminum bottled water options
It's a
in the
great option. It's a great option. Yeah.
Also on CBS Sunday Morning last week, there was a feature about recycling and plastics and how much of it is really recyclable. So I don't know if you happen to know about that one, but that might be one that we can put in the link to, can put in the chat, because it's, I don't know, maybe a 5-10 minute discussion of what's recyclable and what isn't. And can you speak at all about some of the supply chain stuff? I know when you and I were talking at first, you were saying there was maybe some treaties or some more compliance or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's, a big part of what we're here for in Ottawa, is talking about that treaty. And that treaty it's about, hopefully, we're advocating for, reduction and also recognizing the health impacts of plastic, but it's also about establishing some norms for whatever plastic is decided on, and how that trade will work, so that there's a standardization. So today, what's allowed to be shipped to or produced in, one country may be very different than the country literally next door. And so it creates a lot of supply chain issues and inefficiencies in the marketplace. And so part of this treaty is really a business-facing treaty to say, okay, if we're going to produce it and let's decide what we're going to produce, then let's standardize how it's produced. So at least there are some efficiencies on the business side that make it more palatable economically. And hopefully by doing that also and limiting the number, we can build sort of downstream systems that'll help alleviate some of the health problems and pollution problems. Again, unfortunately, the real solve is to just do less, but these are good, at least intermediate steps to help improve the supply chain, help improve the business aspects, give us time maybe to get to that next stage.
Okay. We've got a couple questions coming in, and I didn't give a whole lot more time for this. Let me see if I can, if we're not going to get to all the questions, by the way, we can forward some of these to you, Tom, maybe, and you can
absolutely
send us some backups.
Sure.
Yeah. Actually, two board members have asked questions. One that was just kind of questioning that the video stated that the production of plastic is going to be reduced, but you had said that it's increasing. So she was just wondering what the
Sure. Yeah. Well, what we're advocating for is a reduction. We want to see a 60% reduction by 2040. And as I said, we feel that's possible because single use represents 50% in and of itself. And so if we can make a big dent there, we can make a big dent overall in the number. The unfortunate trend is that currently production's anticipated to double by 2040. So we're hoping it'll go this way. Unfortunately, it is going the other way. And that's sort of the crisis we see looming. If we're having these issues today with the number we're producing, we double that in just, 14, 15 years, and then triple it by 2060. It's unimaginable the issues we're going to have. So yeah, so we're trying to pull it back, find some ways to other solutions, and curb the growth in the industry.
And the other question, thank you. The other question is there's a lot of news a year or so ago of plastic recycling being shipped to overseas destinations. Is that still going on?
It still is going on. There's a huge issue with sort of where the plastics are produced, where the plastics are used, and ultimately where they're disposed. And so the Global South is taking a huge brunt of the impact of the production that's being made here and in other industrialized and wealthier countries around the world. And they have become, unfortunately, the dumping ground for a lot of the plastics produced elsewhere in the world. And the health impacts in those countries, not surprisingly, have been more severe and broader, impacting the society there. We yesterday did what we think is the world's largest cleanup in Malaysia. Over 100,000 people came out. It was great. They cleaned up a lot of trash. A lot of that trash was coming from the US. So that's a problem we have to solve. And again, the best way to solve it is reducing the overall production of plastics.
Well, good luck with the conference, and I hope that you're able to come together and come up with something that's going to have an impact. And I know that it will make an impact if we all can look for ways that we can do our part. Couple of other links that we will send out from the website, from Tom's website, include something, a blog post, I think it's a blog post about fast fashion, because we've got a lot of fashion. Our ecosystem here is pretty strong, so it's good to kind of know what fashion is good and what isn't. And then also agriculture is a big regional industry for us. So you've got a link there on regenerative agriculture. So we can put those links out, and I encourage everybody to just go to the website and follow up, and sure, send us additional questions for Tom. I know we didn't get to all of them. And thank you for your work. We appreciate it. I'm glad that you were able to encourage us. Somewhat encouraging, somewhat disturbing, right?
There's hope. There is hope. I don't want to leave everyone depressed. There is hope. We did things with the ozone layer. We mostly fixed that problem. It can happen. We can pull it off. humans are pretty amazing people. So I have hope. We have to be optimistic.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We want to make sure that the other two speakers have plenty of time because they are also very inspirational and informational. And I think it's a good transition that we're going to you next, Haley, because you've actually found a way to incorporate some recycled plastic into your packaging, as far as I can understand. So, audience, let's turn our attention to Haley, who's the CEO of Chip-In. And Haley, tell us about your business and how and why you focus on sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Haley, founded Chip-In. We're a sustainable pet nutrition company. And I think coming off the back of everything that Tom just shared, a nice example of an actionable opportunity for folks to chip in, as we like to say, for pets and the planet. So I started the company inspired by solving what I saw as a massive gap within the pet food industry. So I imagine most of the folks on this call have a pet in their household, if they're anything like the average American household. And we realized, pet food industry has more than doubled since 2020 or 2015. So you're looking at, in the US alone, this is a market that has gone from a little over 25 billion to more than 50 billion in the span of less than a decade. Along with that, you have a ton of materials being used in the creation of pet food, whether that be ingredients, everything from the proteins to the grains being used, to all of the plastic in which the pet food is then housed. And so my background was I had started my career in finance, then worked in food and beverage for people, and had kind of my aha moment that led me to founding Chip-In when I was in a grocery store using my reusable water bottle like we were talking about before, wearing my not fast fashion clothes, and I hit the pet food aisle and I saw that it was so much of the same stuff that had been since I was a kid. Plenty of innovation from a format standpoint, so things like refrigerated or fresh, but all of the actual kind of nuts and bolts of the food, whether it be beef, chicken, pork, the proteins being used, or then the kind of thick plastic, bulky bags being used to house it, were the same. And so we started Chip-In, again, inspired by this ability to bring high quality pet foods that are better for the planet to market. We started with an assortment of products that are geared toward dogs, the huge opportunity within cats, which we'll get to eventually. But the products that we made for dogs, if any of you all have canine companions, are made out of unique protein sources. And so we tap into insects, invasive species, algae, all things that use far less of our resources, whether it be land or water, don't have the same emissions profile as kind of your status quo proteins. And we identified that, making this core product more sustainable from an ingredient standpoint, that we really wanted to ensure that there was consistency in the way that we're making our product by putting it into packaging that was also more sustainable. And so we were really on the cutting edge in bringing to use packaging made out of post-consumer recycled content. And so if you look at, kind of trying to move away from single-use plastics, one of the challenges, especially within the food space, is that there are regulations and a lot of food safety concerns where doing things that are reusable or certain formats can be tricky. And so the solve that we found is working with a partner that enabled us to actually house our dog foods in products that are up to 50% post-consumer recycled content. And so this is typically materials like yogurt cups or milk jugs that then are broken back down, put in the plastic bag. It's about 50% of the content, and it's kind of interesting because the look and feel definitely is a little bit different. And so And it's more expensive for us, but we're committed to it. So you have kind of these almost little like bubble like textured elements in the packaging, and it can be a bit more crinkly. And at first that was something that from a consumer standpoint caused a tiny bit of confusion. Some people said it seemed cheaper, even though it isn't. But over time, it ended up being actually not only a value add for our planet and this push for reduction in production of virgin plastic, but also almost like a little competitive advantage, because our crinkly packaging is something that the dogs learn to associate with the chip in, and would start to, their ears would perk up, and then whenever a pet parent grabs the chip in, they can more easily hear it and kind of run for their treats. I think some of the things that, in addition to just the packaging and how that is made, we're really sensitive to, and I think is oftentimes overlooked, is the impact of plastic, even within kind of the upstream portion of a consumer good. And so, like, yes, very clear, you have a dog treat or dog food, it's in a plastic bag. You're trying to be mindful of, using less of that if you can, but pet food's tricky because it's harder to make yourself and hit the nutritional goals of your furry family member. So you're really kind of relying on the company, but there's also kind of this whole upstream portion of the value chain where, if we look at like fishing, for instance, by some estimates, 10% of ocean plastics is coming from fishing gear. And so the choices that we have made, even on the ingredient side, affect how much plastic is going into our waterways. So for instance, we are very focused on helping scale up the use of an invasive fish. So I mentioned we use invasives in some of our pet foods. One is invasive carp. And so we have a couple products made out of this fish that is all throughout the Mississippi River Basin, very close to St. Louis. And it is such a great opportunity because it's a fish that we actually need to fish for. We are then supporting local contract fisher folk, and the way that it's caught and the kind of fishing gear practices that are used are such that we're not then contributing to this massive quantity of fishing gear that ends up in our ocean and also harms biodiversity, and then also ultimately us. So that's, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the core of what we're up to from a product standpoint, some of how it plays into the effort to reduce plastics, and happy to answer any questions anytime.
Yeah, I think we'll save the questions till after Alan goes, but yeah, those are some great, I mean, I wrote down all kinds of things, but I'm going to give other people a chance to ask some questions. Only like to put my plug in there that we got a bag of Chippin treats in a Chewy delivery, and this was before I knew that it was an Arch Grant winner, and my dog doesn't usually like fish, but she loves those snacks. So, and I love, yeah.
Well,
great stories,
thank you for the plug.
Yeah, I want to make, I could talk to you all day, so I'm going to stop talking to you so that Alan has a chance to make his presentation, which is also fascinating. Alan, you just got back from seeing some temperature extremes, and that's kind of what your business is about too, but we'd like to hear from you. Why don't you go, I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A for all of you, but why don't you go ahead and start your presentation, and I will go off camera here.
Absolutely. I'm Alan Coggins. Thank you all for joining today. And yeah, as Susan was just saying, I just came back from a trip into the Arctic, actually into Yellowknife and into Iqaluit, which is up in the Northwest Territories for Yellowknife, and Nunavut with Callowit there. And so, yes, this here is me on top of the world, as I like to say. It was quite an experience. This was just about 2 days ago, and it was snowing before I left and everything. And just to hear the needs and what the people are facing, both in energy, plastics, food, the whole 9 yards there, was quite something. And Haley, you're going to get a kick out of this here in a second as well. And of course, tying into our plastics here, we went into a grocery store there, and a bottle or a case of water was $42. And of course, you can see all the plastics that's there. And unfortunately, they are ending up in landfills up there as well. And of course, Haley, as you see here, the Pedigree pet food, $88 for a bag there. So there might be a new market there for you. And as you see on the picture on the right here, this is kind of playing into energy that we're talking about as well. Of course, that is a propane tank with a heater on it. I mean, so they have heaters for their heaters, which to me just seems kind of ridiculous, but it's what they need in the area. And of course, they're facing numerous challenges throughout different parts of the world. So what is Cocoon and what do we do? We are a manufacturer of furnaces, ductwork heaters, sensible heat storage, and electrical battery systems. I like to let people know that we are path to energy independence or sustainability. Unfortunately, politics like to play one against the other, and hey, people, they are one and the same. I'm a big advocate of that. We do reduce, the resiliency, and can help cut the grid peak demands and so on, and help eliminate the reliance on fossil fuels. And we have been third-party tested and verified that we use up to 41% less energy to produce heat. One thing I wanted to show you about the pictures here is that our systems are very scalable. We can scale from a small system all the way up to a larger system that's needed in order to help save, pollution and energy and everything else, right? And the other nice thing about that is that if you have, I've had it throughout my career where somebody put a wrong furnace in. Well, then they had to pull that furnace out, and now all of a sudden, you have to have a new furnace. Well, now there's all kinds of other pollution and everything else that comes along with that, and you've got a brand new piece of equipment that's not any good. However, we are able to actually rebuild and reutilize our systems as needed, and to be able to help in numerous situations. As I said, we're in electrical storage, scalability. I like to, reduce, reuse, recycle, and scale. I think that's a big thing. And you can take scale into all three of those aspects and even scale your solutions too. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're able to utilize renewable energies to run our furnace due to our energy breakthrough and due to the comfort and all those kinds of things that happen with us. Able to use grid, wind, solar, hybrid, number of different aspects behind that. Some of the benefits to our system: no carbon monoxide. We don't rely on fossil fuels. Energy storage, because other parts of the world, we're pretty pretty spoiled here in Missouri that we don't have peak demands and those kinds of things. And there's just numerous benefits to our system, than what we see throughout, with other than our other competitors. And our competitors are people like Carrier and Train and all of those. And not to mention, that we're able to, give a more constant cost to run, right? Less fluctuations in gas prices, diesel prices. Because up in Callowitz, they're using diesel as heat and energy production, and oil as well for heat and whatnot. So we're very cleaner. We're very, we pollute less, much more safe. That's the other thing. And we are direct replacement for just about anything that's out there. And why is this important to source, local? Why do we look in our business? Like, how can we take the opportunity to, what can we use locally in that particular area? Or what can we do to increase our security and our supply chain? If you guys remember during COVID, our ports shut down. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but unfortunately, a lot of the technology that our government has gotten behind, such as heat pump technology, which is a good technology, but 90% of them are made, 90% of the parts are made overseas, and 80% of the whole units themselves are made overseas. So where's the job creation here at home, and where's our security and our supply chain in regards to that? Not to mention reduce greenhouse gases. When you have an opportunity to get something local, you have just less of a carbon footprint all around. Again, we're supporting you support the local economy and the GDP across there, job creations. And one of the big things, like I learned in Kalowitz, is that they have a lot of money come in, if you will, into their community, but also that money goes right back out of the community. So they're looking for ways to keep that money inside of the community. So when you're able to use local and source local and everything as well, you're doing so much on so many levels, and that's one reason why we try to we try to take these practices and implement them into our business. I think it helps us keeps our costs down and just a number of different things. One of the biggest things here, just kind of what people say about our systems, and one of the biggest things I wanted to point out, we have some furnaces in some of the harshest climates on Earth, and the one in the upper right hand corner here, we actually have a rebate in Newfoundland that when they replace an oil heating system with our system, we've actually seen upwards of a 50% energy savings on that customer's bill. And you got to remember, other places throughout the world, unlike St. Louis here, we have about a, call it 5, maybe, 6-month heating season. Up there, they might be 10 to 11-month heating season. So a 50% reduction can be huge and can be, massive savings for a homeowner or a business or anything else. So when you really kind of get into that and you really look at that, what that does globally, what that does for the local communities throughout the world, it just puts that money right back into that community, which is a big deal. And a lot of people have asked me, they said, Alan, why do you do what you do? Why are you so passionate about energy and about, reduce, reuse, recycle? And it's pretty much this right here. These are my lovely wife, my daughter, and my 2 granddaughters. And, I believe in not kicking the can down the road. I don't want my granddaughters or my grandchildren, to deal with an issue that we are dealing with now. And, that's a big reason why. And not to mention, that picture right there I took about 4 days ago or 5 days ago of the Northern Lights. And, I would love for my grandchildren to be able to see that, or my grandchildren to be able to see that. And not, us not mess this planet up before they have an opportunity to as well. So, I know I kind of ran through that presentation quick, but I didn't want to bore everybody with a slideshow presentation ultimately. But again, we're taking these practices into our business in regards to onshoring what we can, bringing back what we can here in the U.S. For a number of reasons, resiliency. Like I said, when COVID happened and the ports shut down, there were people that couldn't get a furnace or couldn't get an air conditioner for 22 plus weeks. Do the math on that. I mean, that's a long time to go without heat or without cooling. And so when you really start to look at that and just the whole reasoning behind it, not just energy savings and resiliency, but also to reduce that carbon footprint ultimately, no matter how you look at it. I mean, that's a big deal. And I'm really happy to say too, during my time in Kalowitz, I believe we have found a product up there as well that we can incorporate into our business, hopefully to create some jobs up there, and also to ship less air, right? We want to ship technology, not air. And that's where a lot of the savings come from. And, of course, that reducing that carbon footprint.
Great. Thank you, Alan.
uh,
Yeah, that was a very interesting presentation. And as you know, as everybody knows, that one of the mission, the mission really is to grow our region from an international perspective, and that includes exporting, right? But that's not just sort of a blind, we want everybody to ship everything out, right? We still want to do it in a way that makes sense, that's sustainable, that still, supports jobs here. And there, I think that's one of those things that's going to shift in terms of what actually gets traded internationally. But I think that trade will still make a lot of sense internationally, but then there'll be ways to keep, to make it reduce the environmental impact, like you say. It may be good to just, well, I don't know if we should take the time, but there is a link, if Annie can put it in there, from your website that just kind of talks about the technology. What actually is it, so that's explains to people why it's a little bit more, or quite a bit more, I guess, energy efficient. So that's not just affecting people's bills, but affecting, the earth itself. So we can put a link in there, and I want to be able to open it up. We've only got probably about 7 more minutes of Q&A, because we've got a couple little things we're going to say to wrap up at the end. So if people want to put some questions in the Q&A button, we will answer those. And Annie says, looks like she's already posted that link about how it works. Thank you, Annie. Let's see, and didn't know whether it looks like Tom had to drop off, so I was expecting that because there are still some questions for him. Haley, one question that I had was, I know that big companies like Walmart are putting pressure on their suppliers, right, to comply with ESG kinds of things. Do you find yourself kind of squeezed between those requirements and then what you have to do to kind of get the packaging and get the products out there? Or do they kind of align? Like what they're asking you to do, does that align with what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I think actually for us, that's more of an example of how sustainability is a beneficial business opportunity and a differentiator and a form of competitive advantage for us, because we started with these kind of products. And so we launched on Chewy, which is where you bought from, late last year. And one of the biggest pulls for them in bringing on our products, and now they've brought a couple of new products on in the past month, is that they were missing, sustainable packaging, sustainable ingredients in their assortment. And so we see that kind of across the board. And so I think those kind of commitments that these large corporates have made to meet their ESG goals over the next 5, 10, 20 years, they're coming due. And we can actually be a partner and a source of support and help and collaborator, which is exciting.
That's great. Yeah, I have heard, I've been very interested in ESG topics and trying to kind of get the word out to folks about it. And I know you can look at it as, you can dread it, like, oh my gosh, this is additional regulations, or you can look at it as a differentiator and a way to actually showcase, what you can accomplish. And unfortunately, both ways, either way, like it or hate it, it's coming, right? Or it's already here. So to the point that you can leverage it, and I've heard a couple presentations where there's typically some low-hanging fruit within your organization where you can look at things you may already be tracking, or things that wouldn't be too hard to adjust for. So I guess my other question, while we're waiting for people to put questions in the chat, is on the international side of things, just curious, I don't know if it's going to line up with the plastics theme, but what international sort of experiences have you folks run into in terms of your businesses? Either one of you can jump in.
You want to go first, Ellen?
Sure. Yeah, so as far as like things that we've run into is, really just, making sure that we have the right classifications and those kinds of things, because, if your product is classified wrong, then, they may be looking at at an import tax that they wouldn't otherwise need. Other things too is that, what we're finding is that other parts of the world may be more receptive to new ideas and new technologies, say more so than home. Unfortunately, my industry, and Haley, I'm not sure if yours is that way, but this is the way we've always done it. Is a big hurdle that we have to have, and that is not good for any business or or anything in regards to that. Having that open mind and whatnot. So I mean, just really just trying to be able to focus in regards to areas that make sense for the business and also make sense from a sustainable aspect has really been good as well for us.
Yeah. So I think on our end, one of the, at least as it relates to the items that we're procuring, we made a pretty big push to shorten our supply chain. And that was something that enabled us to de-risk some of the challenges that folks saw throughout COVID, and then also just like a broader challenge within pet food ingredient procurement is traceability around ingredients that are coming internationally. More than 70% of fish in the US is imported, and there's very little know-how around labor practices related to those imports. And so we actively try to avoid that. But as we look at, moving forward, definitely interested in exploring on the export side, how can we share some of what we're doing with some of these really fast growing global markets where customers in Asia or LATAM are actively seeking pet food products that are from the US because they're more trusted.
Great. So that lines up with a couple of things. Actually, in May, our Engage in Trade topic is going to be convergence in sort of US trade policy on sustainability and traceability, and even on the import side. So importers are going to have to start paying a lot more attention to that as well. I don't see any additional questions here. So I could, as I said, I could ask questions all day long. I don't know if anyone else is. Alan, have you found some ways that, like Haley had talked about, how what looked like a liability at first sort of became an advantage? I think you were inventing something, right? So maybe it was an advantage right off the bat. But do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, not so much what looked like a liability that became, an advantage. I mean, yeah, the fact that I invented this and the fact that, we have something new that the world hasn't seen, and we're able to make strides in the energy sector. I mean, that's been quite good. The one thing I will say is, like, even on this trip, identifying other problems throughout, like in Iqaluit there. They don't have a really like, all of their produce has to be imported, right? Like, it has to be flown in or shipped in. And so now, that makes my inventor brain, start to go in overdrive of, okay, how can we help? How can we help that and provide a solution for that in there? And we're talking Arctic conditions, so that it brings a whole new set of challenges in there. So I mean, I guess that might fit in a little bit with that, but it really kind of comes down to, okay, identifying other problems and how are we able to fit and provide a solution that makes sense.
Yeah. Great. Well, we are just a couple minutes away from the end of the webinar, so I appreciate you both. It's very interesting to hear what you guys are doing. We want to encourage you to keep doing that. And while we have heard some disheartening things, I do think that we all can play a part in making choices and making a difference. So as I mentioned, our next event is it's the Engage in Trade series. The next event is U.S. Trade Policy, the Convergence of Import and Export Compliance. And then we also are going to have a networking reception on May 30th. We've moved from the 12th floor to the 2nd floor of the same building in Clayton where we are. So you all are welcome to join us for that. There is a QR code there on the screen, and I think Annie will be putting a link in there for an evaluation. We always like to get your feedback on the pertinence of the webinar topics that we present, and any ideas for additional topics are always welcome as well. And let's see, am I leaving anything else out here? I think that's it. Yep, I think that's it. So thank you, everybody. Very informative, very helpful, and wishing everyone a great Earth Day and a great week. Thanks.